Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Ritter, Channel 7 Eyewitness News, WABC TV, and welcome once again to the countdown. This time a live edition, an historic day in New York State, but not one to celebrate. Andrew M. Cuomo, the third-term governor who ruled with an iron fist and made plenty of enemies along the way, has resigned. His resignation taking effect in 14 days and will complete one of the most stunning falls from grace in American political history, certainly in New York political history. Mr. Cuomo speaking for 21 minutes today, defiant to the very end. But despite what he called an initial instinct to fight the sexual harassment claims made against him, he ultimately succumbed to the pressure of this weighty scandal. In 2 weeks, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul will be sworn in, becoming New York's first female governor. We're going to walk you through every angle, every part of this historic day with our political analysts on our team of reporters. We're going to begin with Eyewitness News reporter N.J. Burkett. He's in Midtown Manhattan. N.J.
And that's right, Bill. You know, the initial reaction is, of course, shock. But this should come as a surprise to no one. Governor Andrew Cuomo has struggled for months to seize control of the narrative. But in the end, today he found himself alone in the room with little choice but to resign.
The best way I can help now is if I step aside and let government get back to governing.
There was no way out, and Andrew Cuomo knew it. Abandoned by everyone but his legal team, the 56th governor of New York admitted that he could no longer weather the storm.
If I could communicate the facts through the frenzy, New Yorkers would understand. I believe that. But when I took my oath as governor, then it changed. I became a fighter, but I became a fighter for you.
Speaking from the same room where he led New Yorkers through the pandemic, Governor Cuomo apologized to his accusers while attempting at the same time to defend his conduct, insisting his comments were misunderstood and his gestures misinterpreted. As for the female state trooper who accused him of groping her, he said this.
I did not mean any sexual connotation. I did not mean any intimacy by it. I just wasn't thinking. It was totally thoughtless in the literal sense of the word.
But the words would ring hollow for the governor's political supporters and his enemies alike. The state assembly had the votes to impeach Cuomo within a matter of weeks. Fighting, he said, would have been futile.
The state assembly yesterday outlined weeks of process that will then lead to months of litigation. Time and money that government should spend managing COVID, guarding against the Delta variant, reopening upstate, fighting gun violence, and saving New York City. All that time would be wasted.
Vindication, no doubt, for the victims, the accusers, their supporters, their attorneys. A stunning political flameout for a New York governor. Yes, it's a political tragedy for Governor Andrew Cuomo. It is also a deeply personal one for his family. Live tonight in Midtown, N.J. Burkett, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Well put, N.J. Thank you. Mr. Cuomo tonight is back in Albany, back in the governor's mansion that he's not only called home for the last nearly 11 years as the state's top elected official, but also a mansion he's quite familiar with because his mother and father lived there for 12 years, way back when Mario Cuomo was governor. Late this afternoon, he wasn't exactly behaving like a governor who announced his resignation just a few hours before. He was tweeting out the latest coronavirus numbers, perhaps a sign that it will be at least a little business as usual for the next 14 days. And the virus, of course, very worrisome. But after that, after 2 weeks, Kathy Hochul will run this state, the first woman, as we said, to hold the job. Lots to unpack from Albany, and there for us tonight, Eyewitness News reporter Jim Dolan to continue our coverage. Jim.
Bill, Governor Cuomo will leave the executive mansion in 2 weeks' time, headed toward an uncertain future. After 11 years as governor, he will not get to write the story of his time in office. It was written instead in a blistering, scathing report from the state attorney general that led many to believe Andrew Cuomo was unfit for office. A sanguine smile as the governor got out of his car at the East Side helipad today and headed for the chopper that will ferry him for just 2 weeks more. The governor decided today that his future as governor was hopeless, and nobody disagreed.
I think this is a dark chapter in his long tenure as a public servant. I think, unfortunately, he'll be remembered for that.
State Attorney General Letitia James, whose investigation into allegations of sexual harassment sparked an impeachment drive and the governor's resignation today, said she also believed Mr. Cuomo made the right decision. Today closes a sad chapter for all of New York, but it's an important step towards justice, she wrote. I thank Governor Cuomo for his contributions to our state. The ascension of our Lieutenant Governor, Kathy Hochul, will help New York enter a new day. We must continue, she said, to build on the progress already made and improve the lives of New Yorkers in every part of the state. I know our state is in good hands with Lieutenant Governor Hochul at the helm, and I look forward to continuing to work with her. Not everyone is.
She called for resignation at a very late stage when everyone was calling for resignations. She was very quiet at the peak of the controversy, but woman after woman after woman was stepping on. Why did she not say anything then?
Anybody that underestimates Kathy Hochul is making a very big mistake.
Hochul has spent 7 years preparing for this moment. Today she posted this on Twitter. I agree with the governor's decision to step down. It is the right thing to do and is in the best interest of New Yorkers. As someone who served at all levels of government and is next in line of succession, I am prepared to lead as New York's next governor.
She's very well respected by political leaders of both parties, elected officials throughout. She's visited every one of the 62 counties. She doesn't need a lay of the land to understand how to do her job. And she is, by the way, I will tell you, having campaigned with her, an outstanding retail politician.
Still, it is likely to be an odd 2-week-long interregnum. Governor Cuomo has lost all political support and capital, and yet he will still be governor for the next 2 weeks, even as he prepares to move out and move on. Reporting live from Albany, Jim Dolan, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
He will be governor, and what if there's a big emergency? He will be governor. Jim, great job up there today bringing us the latest. It is no secret, by a long shot, it's no secret, that during his 3 terms in office, certainly during his entire political career, Andrew Cuomo made his share of political enemies. Well, today, some of those political opponents were relieved. Some were even rejoicing. Most Democrats were not rejoicing, but they were relieved. Eyewitness News reporter Stefan Kim, live at City Hall in New York with that part of our coverage. Stefan.
Well, Bill, the political reaction to Governor Cuomo's resignation was mixed. Relieved, as you said, that he stepped down, but many say further insulted by how he did it. Disgusted, vile, and nauseating. Just some of the words we heard today.
Surprised that it happened, knowing the governor, how he operates. We weren't sure if this would come. So I am glad, and I know many people are glad to try to see this chapter close.
Public advocate Jumaane Williams, no fan of Governor Cuomo, thought the governor was going to be removed from office, but he's not surprised at how Cuomo resigned.
It's typical Cuomo. Generally speaking, the way I've seen him govern is really all about him. And even as you're leaving, to do it in the way he did, to have to hear from my own staff about it being triggering, and knowing that he was triggering people who had to suffer and are victims of the type of harassment and abuse, and sexual abuse and harassment that he moved forward, it's really disgusting.
Mayor de Blasio, not a political ally in any way, saying in a statement, "Make no mistake, this is the result of survivors bravely telling their stories. It was past time for Andrew Cuomo to resign, and it's for the good of all New York." Presumed incoming Mayor Eric Adams adding, the governor's resignation was necessary for New York State to move forward and continue the critical work of our recovery.
I was surprised that that was the speech that he had going out. I thought that was really grotesque and vile.
Assembly member Yulene New, among several in the chamber who want to proceed with impeachment proceedings, despite the governor's resignation. If impeached, Cuomo would no longer collect a pension and will be barred from running for office again.
The toxic, environment that he created isn't just going to end the minute that he leaves this time around.
I think he's hoping that we won't go forward with any actions, but we could still forward impeachment and removal proceedings, which would mean he couldn't run for office again in New York State.
Now, meanwhile, the public advocate's name is one that has been floated for governor. When we asked him who he would think would be the next right leader for New York, he said that now is the time to support Kathy Hochul, and then went on to lay out the pressing need to help tenants waiting to be evicted, perhaps an early platform for a potential run. Reporting live at City Hall, Stefan Kim, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
Lots of people are going to be ready for a potential run, I believe. Stefan, thank you for all your reporting today. Joining us now, know something about potential runs. Former New York City Council Speaker Christine Quinn, also the vice chair of the Democratic Party. Chris, welcome to Countdown. I do want to say and pay kudos to you, give kudos to you. In the Up Close that you were on, taped and aired on Sunday, you, I believe, said, in fact, I know you said, it's going to happen pretty quickly. I'd say Monday or Tuesday. And sure enough, on Tuesday, it happened just 1 week after this report was released. Were you surprised? I mean, I know you predicted it, but were you surprised when it actually happened?
Even though I predicted it, I was surprised because, you know, Governor Cuomo kind of has one gear, and that gear is fight. And I thought he would really think about taking it to impeachment because he wasn't going to want to give in. And even in his comments today, he really didn't admit any wrongdoing and didn't really apologize. But I think what happened is his staff and his aides and people close to him continued to tell him he needed to resign. And I think he kept searching for someone to say, no, you can stay. And he couldn't find anyone to say that. And then his top aide, his, right-hand person, Melissa DeRosa, resigned. And then I think the writing was on the wall, and even Cuomo couldn't convince himself that there was potential left.
And then there was really no off-ramp for him to look at, right? I mean, impeachment was going to happen, although the New York Times today on their front page said, hey, he's really pushing this. He's delaying this. He's trying to delay the entire process by weeks, maybe months. But that wasn't enough.
No, and that move to try to delay only angered the Assembly and the Senate, a place where he doesn't have a lot of fans to begin with. I mean, last week when the Democrats in the Assembly, and the Assembly is vast majority Democrats, when they caucused, the Speaker Hasty, kind of went around in a roll call of sorts and said, show of hands if you're with the governor. And there were no hands raised. No one was supporting the governor. I mean, that speaks volumes. Democrats.
Yeah, it's interesting. We said earlier, that he made a lot of enemies during his career. He's not the nicest guy sometimes. He bullies people, blah, blah, blah. We've heard all the allegations. But most importantly, he didn't make friends that much, and I think that's, in the end, the friends he did have gave him up, and he had no support anywhere.
Well, I think, you're right. He had a lot of enemies. He is a guy who's never had that many friends. I will say I worked very closely with him on a number of different issues and would have at a different time spoken positively of him. But this report by the Attorney General was so damning. What he did makes it impossible to stand with him now or ever again in the future. It really makes those of us who worked with him really feel like we were misled and manipulated.
And here was a guy who backed the Me Too movement, supported women who brought it all forward, fought for rules about fighting harassment in the workplace, did incredible things for marriage equality and gay rights in this state. We were on the forefront of that. He was on the forefront of that.
He was, and also legislation. We have the toughest legislation around rape and sexual assault on college campuses. So all of what you just said, Bill, and more, you would never think this guy was a sexual harasser and a sexual assaulter. You would never think that. But now his, legacy is completely tainted, and his legacy becomes that of a hypocrite, not of all of those things he achieved. And marriage equality was monumental.
I wonder what he thought, in his quiet moments as he was sort of alone in that mansion where he didn't grow up there, but he was there as a young adult, working for his father, having dinners there. Mario Cuomo did not want to spend a night out of that mansion. We see pictures of him hugging his father right there after a victory.
Right.
It was a big familial thing, and I wonder what he had to have thought. What would my dad be saying to do?
I'm sure he thought that a million times. You know, it's been said and written about that he always seemed like he was kind of competing with his father, you know, chasing after the ghost of his father to get a fourth term, which eluded Mario, and now he won't even finish a third term. So I can imagine that was one of the main things that went through his head, as well as his mother, Matilda, who is still alive.
Still alive, exactly. Let me take a right turn into all this and ask you about Kathy Hochul.
Yes.
How well do you know her? You're a vice chair of the party. What's on her agenda? We talked, by the way, to Assemblyman Ron Kim today, who just laid down the gauntlet today and said she better stop this, reverse everything that he did, bring a gentler, kinder spirit into the management of the governor's office, or else. So there are people who are saying she's got to change the culture of that place.
Well, you know, look, I know Kathy Hochul very well. I campaigned with her in both, in both of her races. And she's somebody who, you know, she's visited every county in the state in both terms. Why does that matter? Because Kathy is a participatory people person. She went around the state wanting to hear what New Yorkers needed and wanted. That's what she's going to bring to the Capitol, an open government that's inclusive, whose agenda is developed by the people, not kind of from on high. Two, you know, when she was in Congress, she lost re-election in a Republican district, only by 2 points. Why? Because she voted for Obamacare. She knew that voting for Obamacare might cost her her seat, but she's someone who has, you know, the convictions of her conscience and is going to do what is right with the political results be damned. So I think the Assembly member, as he gets an opportunity to work more closely with her when she is sworn in as governor, is going to be very surprised and very happy about how easy she is to work with.
Two things struck me about her today in all of our hours long of live coverage today. One, she was not mentioned once in the governor's self-praising book about leadership during a pandemic. And number two, Republicans we talked to on air said, we want to find out exactly how involved she was in some of these things, like the book and staff. Did she know staff helped him write that book, and nursing home problems and controversies?
I mean, I thought it was odd that the governor really didn't mention her in any substantial way in his comments. The second point, and I understand those questions from Republicans or Democrats, and I bet she does too. You know, the governor really ran things kind of in a very, very tight circle, which the lieutenant governor was not in. So I have no doubt she has no knowledge of any of those things, because that is not the way Governor Cuomo worked with the lieutenant governor.
Right. She is speaking publicly tomorrow at the governor's office, actually, and we will find out. One more question. Does the landslide, the avalanche of potential candidates now start? Is she the favorite candidate?
Yeah, I mean, I think people's heads are going to spin. We're going to hear so many names, and then this one's going to drop out and this one's going to come back in. It'll be a fun, you know, we should all make bingo cards and see what names we get in the bingo game of who's going to be a candidate for governor and lieutenant governor.
Will one of those candidates maybe perhaps be one Christine Quinn?
You know, I'm at Wynn working hard for homeless folks in the 5 boroughs, and that's what I'm focused on every day. Just last week, we opened more permanent housing in Queens, and I'm very proud of that.
And it's work that's well needed, but I just thought we'd make some news on Countdown, maybe. If you
Thank you. We have enough news.
Exactly, right. All right, Christine Quinn, thank you very much for giving us your insight on Countdown.
You're welcome.
All right, good luck to you. When she released her report a week ago today, Attorney General Letitia James said, I believe these women. Eyewitness News reporter Lauren Glassberg has more on the women in the Attorney General's report.
Today, some of those women sounded off on social media. Lindsey Boylan, the first accuser, noting the governor was, quote, blaming victims till the end. Charlotte Bennett's attorney saying the governor's resignation, quote, underscores that sexual harassment is no longer acceptable, no matter what office the harasser holds.
He brought it on himself.
Former Cuomo consultant Karen Hinton, who wasn't one of the 11 accusers but is an outspoken critic of the governor, said he knew better. He'd even passed sexual harassment legislation.
It's not like he's so old he doesn't get it. I mean, I don't buy that. He knows exactly what he was doing. He brought it on himself, and he broke the rules. He broke the law he signed, and he knew it.
And today, a new accuser, Susan Iannucci, who shared her story about being in a crowd at an event for the governor.
He looked me in the eye, grabbed my arm, and pulled me toward him and kissed me on the cheek without asking if I was okay, with such a personal greeting.
That moment then used by the governor last week when he sought to explain his overly affectionate ways, behavior that the governor may finally realize is inappropriate.
There are generational and cultural shifts that I just didn't fully appreciate. And I should have. No excuses.
That line redrawn in bold thanks to the Me Too movement, another powerful man brought down in part because of the way he treats women. On the East Side, Lauren Glassberg, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Joining us now, our political team, ABC News political director Rick Klein and veteran political consultant Hank Scheikoff. Hank, I want to start with you. You have covered and worked with and known both Cuomo's, Mario, and Mr. Andrew, the governor. Were you surprised? You sort of said up close and before last week that you wouldn't be surprised if he resigned. He has nowhere to go. But were you surprised it happened this quickly?
It was surprising it happened this quickly. And as I predicted on Up Close in our conversations, you and I and Rick, that he would have to be yanked out of there. And that's exactly what happened. They made him an offer he couldn't refuse. You want to be impeached, you want to go to trial, you want to lose your pension, or you want to be locked up, as we said on the show. And guess what? That's exactly what went down.
And Rick, what's the national perspective on this? You know, today President Biden was asked about this, and he said, you know, I said he should resign before, but then he went and talked about the great things that the Governor Cuomo did, and did not want to say this was some sort of taint on the Democratic Party. Obviously, he didn't want to say that.
Yeah, and he said he did a hell of a job as governor. Later, his team was clarifying to say that he was referring to his work on infrastructure, but that wasn't the question. He was talking more broadly about the legacy, separate from his treatment about women. But to me, it is a reminder, it just underscores a bit of what Governor Cuomo said about the cultural shifts. Joe Biden was accused of much lesser potential offenses in terms of his interactions with women on rope lines and the like. And I think also was struck, surprised by some of the fallout from it that was confronted with him in the campaign. So I feel like Joe Biden views this in a bit like this is something that happened to Andrew Cuomo and that it's an unfortunate thing, when, of course, the women that came with their accusations were saying extremely serious things, in some cases sexual harassment, potential sexual assault. So I feel like there's a generation of male Democrats who look at this and say, you know, they're for the grace. Some of them themselves have had things happen that are, you know, very similar in terms of allegations. And they sit here tonight and say, wow, one of their brightest stars, one of the leading lights of the Democratic Party, one of the most prominent members of one of the most prominent families in recent decades for Democrats, has his whole career ended, shattered by this moment. And I think a lot of Democrats are glad to be done with Andrew Cuomo, glad that this episode is over, glad that he saw the writing on the wall, but also looking at this moment and head spinning a bit by how high he went and how far he fell.
Hank, looking forward a little bit, how much will Republicans play on the fact that the last two elected governors of New York have each resigned in scandal? Eliot Spitzer and now Andrew Cuomo.
It will all depend, frankly, Bill, on how quickly the government and all parts of it can get themselves organized. If there's chaos and put that on top of the rising crime numbers in New York City and New York State, well, then it will be chaos and the Republicans will do very well with it. But if things move quickly into order, it'll be very difficult to mention Cuomo or Spitzer again, because the electorate, frankly, will want to move along. And that's really where this is going. Move along, get past this quickly.
You know, we often talk, Rick, about, you know, a year being forever in politics. And yet a year ago, you look at this, you know, Cuomo, despite the controversies, the Republicans have been raising these controversies about the nursing homes for a long time, right into the late spring of 2020. But he was a rising star. He was a big-time celebrity. There was even talk when people were worried about Joe Biden, Democrats were worried about Joe Biden, of maybe Andrew Cuomo going to the convention and, you know, getting the nomination. He was that popular. And now 1 year later, it's a blink of an eye in life, but it's forever in politics. So different.
It is astounding. I mean, there was talk about Biden breaking his pledge to name a female running mate to take Cuomo because he was so prominent. And I was struck by early on in COVID. A lot of people were saying, well, Cuomo is out there doing what Joe Biden should be doing as the presumptive Democratic nominee at the time. He was the face of the government response other than Donald Trump. The flip side of that coin, he threaded the Trumpian needle often, talking about praise at times and critiques at other times. And those daily briefings became national must-watch TV. And there was no bigger political star at the moment than Andrew Cuomo. So, yes, all of that to come crashing down in this moment as part of a broader reckoning that's taken years to play out is truly astounding. You know, the black and white of that report will be there forever, will be an indelible stain. Part of his legacy will also be the handling of COVID. Part of his handling will be, as you mentioned, LGBT issues, handling of New York development and the economy across the state. There'll be a lot of good things said about him. This is always going to be, though, part of what people talk about when they mention the Cuomo name. Yeah, no question about it. Let's look a little to the future. Hank, let me start with you. What's going to happen now? You know, there are some people who think that they can't bring impeachment hearings or charges against him because he's not in office anymore. We've gotten mixed responses, to be honest, today. We don't know what the answer is. And what about the criminal part of all this? He just resigned the governorship, one of the top jobs in the country for an elected official. Has he sort of, is that what happens to someone, and is that the punishment for him? Or are criminal charges a possibility?
That's a decision, frankly, Bill, by the Albany County District Attorney and the Albany County Sheriff, whether they're going to do that or not. And they have the best chance of making a case. Whether there's additional civil litigation is also the decision of the potential litigants. But there's another thing going on here that I just want to raise. Yeah. This is the end of the imperial governor. We've had imperial governors in New York. We have them around the country. We've developed instead into shifted to a process kind of government. That's where this is going. The days of a guy picking up the phone named Andrew Cuomo or Mario Cuomo or Elliot Spitzer and saying, you better do this or are over. And that's a pretty extraordinary thing. You know, we hear that, Rick, from the assemblymen and state assemblywomen, too, and the state senators we talked to today and the last few days. They want to be having a seat at the table. They want to be in the room where it happens. They don't want to just be told what to do. And that's where Cuomo had no choice. He couldn't be governor anymore, and that because there was no one going to listen to him. Yeah, and I think that ultimately he tried to stick it out, but it ended exactly as people thought it would a week or so ago when that report dropped. There was no path forward for him. And I do think that he and Mario Cuomo, the late governor, would have recognized that as an outsider, that there's a time where you're not bigger than the party and you have to do the right thing. And it strikes me to Hank's point, Bill, that this is a huge opportunity for Kathy Hochul because the state is going to want to heal, and a lot of state lawmakers are going to be open to the idea of a governor who conducts herself differently. She's going to be different as the first ever female governor of New York. She's going to have taken over during a tumultuous time where state leadership is going to be desperately needed, desperately wanted. A lot of folks will talk about her background in local politics. When Andrew Cuomo was living his very gilded existence as the son of a former governor who was tagged as being a rising star for the Democratic Party for decades, Kathy Hochul was at semi-anonymous city council meetings outside Buffalo. Much different time, much different way to come up, having run in Congress and served there briefly, and then as we heard Christine Quinn talking about those trips that she made during both terms to every county in the state, that pays dividends. And if she's able to develop some new relationships, bring a new style of governance, I think it's a huge opportunity for her, even ahead of what's going to be a very crowded primary race next year, to put her own stamp on this office for a state that desperately wants a change. Right. She's going to be in office for the next 14 months or so, and that counts. Possession 9/10 of the law. You used to say that when you were a kid. Well, she's got possession of the office, and she can make great headway. And all the Democrats, don't forget, Democrats outnumber Republicans in the state 2-1, 6.5 to 1 in the city of New York, where 40% of the residents of the state live. This is a very big opportunity for her. She could either do really well or kind of blow it and go off into anonymity. But who knows? I think we're going to find out tomorrow. She's got a speaking gig tomorrow, Hank, a press conference at the governor's office in Midtown to talk about it. And what do you want to see from her? What do you think we'll see from her? All we want to see is that she's ready to do the job, that she's calm and she's in control, and she's talking about a couple of things, not a lot, but a couple of things she wants to get done. Small list, not a laundry list, things that are accomplishable. And you know what? The real issue is, will the legislature let her get the job done? That's a different question for another day. This was the big issue of the day, the big story of the day, and I thank you both for being here. I do have one more question, and it would have been our lead story.
The Senate.
I'm not running, Bill. Stop asking. I'm not running for governor.
I thought I would get you asked.
Oh, okay, good.
The Senate today passed a $1.1 trillion infrastructure bill. This is a big deal for President Biden, and it didn't get much play, at least in the tri-state area.
Yeah, it's not the first time that Andrew Cuomo stepped on Joe Biden's news cycle. We remember that happening a lot during the primaries last year. Look, this is a huge moment, and I think Biden should get the moment to acknowledge that his vision of Washington worked for at least this moment. 19 Republicans, people from states including Idaho and Mississippi and Kentucky and Alaska, voted for this bill. And it was Biden who really put the idea forward against a lot of skepticism inside his own party about whether this is even possible to get it to the finish line. So there's a lot of ground that has to be covered still. The House is looking like a problem, and there's a lot more spending that members of the House want on the progressive side. But Biden said it today. This is a sign that democracy can work, and at least for this glimpse, this moment, it's a big achievement. Probably the biggest legislative win so far of the Biden presidency. Yes, overshadowed by the Cuomo news, but real impact on people's lives if this advances all the way through and we get these kind of investments.
And, Mitch McConnell came out in favor of it, worked to have it pass, and guess who criticized him, blasted him in public today? The former president of the United States said he's the most overrated politician in America. Hank?
Oh boy, what is wrong with some people? It is about time, if we've learned anything from the Trump presidency and from Andrew Cuomo's disastrous end, that we start to think about the nation and the states we live in rather than our own personal agendas. It's most extraordinary to me. This is a great achievement for this most amazing country, that we can do some real infrastructure repair. We haven't done anything since the Eisenhower highway system was put in place in the first place. This may be a way to restore the economic system of this nation. And the best that we can hear about is politics. Something awful about that, frankly.
I think that's a good way to end this. And we're talking about Eisenhower. That was the interstate highway system, and it changed this country. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us once again on Countdown, and we'll see you later in the week.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Our coverage does not end here. No. We have a story all about the moments in Mr. Cuomo's life that led up to today up on ABC 7 NY. It's called From America's Governor to the Scandal That Led to Cuomo's Fall. You can also find more information about New York's next governor, the one who takes office in 2 weeks, Kathy Hochul. Thank you so much for joining us on this special live edition of The Countdown. I'm Bill Ritter, and from all of us here at WABC TV and ABC7NY.com, we wish you health and peace, and let's take care of each other.